The AH-64 Apache, a master of the digital battlefield. It tracks 16 targets simultaneously from miles away. It kills in the dark. It is the pinnacle of aviation engineering. But this machine is a descendant of desperation. Its blueprints are written in the blood of crews who had no armor and no sensors. Modern tactics were born when pilots fired at muzzle flashes through broken windshields. The Apache represents the final evolution of a lesson learned in the jungles of Vietnam. How did a flying cargo truck become a tank? It started with a lack of options. In the early 1960s, there was no such thing as an attack helicopter. There was only the Huey, a reliable workhorse but a fragile target. Crew chiefs leaned out of open doors, gripping M60 machine guns with bare hands. They were the only defense against an invisible enemy. The Cobra changed the game, but even that lethal machine was a stopgap. The Army demanded more range. They needed survivability against Soviet-grade threats. This search for a flying tank eventually produced the Apache. It shares almost no parts with its predecessors, yet it carries their DNA. To understand the price of this armor, we must rewind the tape. Back to the era of plywood and canvas. It all began with a single M60 machine gun bolted to a door. 20 years before the Apache became a legend, one pilot proved what a purpose-built war machine could really do. June 18, 1968. Deep in enemy territory, a long-range reconnaissance patrol is pinned down. North Vietnamese troops are closing the circle. The jungle is a wall of muzzle flashes. No transport helicopter can get close. The clearing is too small. The fire is too heavy. First Lieutenant Larry Taylor arrives in his AH-1 Cobra. It is a needle made of aluminum and teeth. Behind him, his wingman. They dive. For 40 minutes, Taylor shreds the tree line. How do you find a target in a black hole? He calls in artillery for illumination. High-altitude flares burst. The magnesium light cuts through the canopy. Taylor sees the muzzle flashes and dives again. Rockets scream from the pods. The minigun cycles at 6,000 rounds per minute. Soon, the bins are empty. The fuel gauges are dropping toward zero. The recon team is still on the ground. The enemy is still coming. Conventional extraction is impossible. Taylor makes a choice. He orders the 4 soldiers to a nearby clearing. Then he flips a switch. The Cobra's landing lights tear through the dark. He becomes a glowing beacon. Every enemy rifle in the valley turns toward him. Tracers spark off the fuselage. Taylor lands the gunship in the dirt. It is a 2-seat cockpit. There is no cabin, no doors, no floor for passengers. The 4 soldiers run through the grass. They don't look for a door. They grab the landing skids. They wrap their arms around the rocket launchers. They cling to the cold metal of the stub wings. Taylor pulls the collective. The Cobra groans under the weight of 4 men hanging on the outside. He flies low. He flies fast. Cold wind screams past the soldiers as they hover inches above the jungle floor. He pulls them out of the kill zone. All 4 survive. 55 years later, Larry Taylor stood in the White House. He received the Medal of Honor. Taylor's heroism was a rare moment of survival. By August 1967, the air war over Vietnam shifted toward a more cynical routine. The Army needed a way to find an invisible enemy. The solution was the hunter-killer team. It was a partnership of predator and prey. The scout helicopter arrived first, the OH-6A. Soldiers called it the Loach. It flew low, skimming the canopy at treetop level. The pilot searched for a muzzle flash or a wisp of smoke. How do you find a sniper in a sea of green? You use a human life as bait. The Loach crew intentionally drew fire. They provoked the jungle. Below them, the Viet Cong opened up with AK-47s and heavy machine guns. Tracers streaked past the thin cockpit glass. The pilot gripped the cyclic, waiting for the hit. In the back, a scout dropped a smoke grenade. A plume of purple or red marked the kill zone. The radio crackled with a single coordinate. Static hissed. Then came the Cobra. The AH-1 loitered at 3,000 feet, hidden, waiting. The moment the smoke rose, the pilot pushed the nose down. The Cobra dove at 170 miles per hour. It was a vertical execution. Miniguns shredded the tree line. Rockets turned the hidden bunkers into craters. The strike was precise and overwhelming. It worked perfectly. Efficiency had a price. The Loach crews faced the highest casualty rates in the air. Between 1966 and 1972, the military lost over 800 OH-6 helicopters. The fatal game of hide-and-seek required a different tool. Not a modified transport, but a purpose-built Predator. The Army needed a flying turret. The AH-1G Cobra was the answer. It stripped away the bulk of the Huey. It kept the muscle. Under its nose sat a rotating chin turret. Engineers packed it with a 7.62mm minigun and the 40mm grenade launcher. Death came in bursts. Stubby wings held the heavy ordnance, 4 rocket pods, 38 Hydra rockets, thousands of rounds for the turret. The Cobra didn't just carry weapons, it was a weapon. Later, technicians added AGM-22 anti-armor missiles. But in the early days of Vietnam, unguided steel was the standard. Protection was a calculated risk. Thick steel plates surrounded the cockpit and vital systems. Bullet-resistant glass shielded the crew. Yet armor was secondary. The Cobra relied on a different shield: speed. It hit 170 miles per hour. That was the magic number. It was fast enough to reach pinned-down units before they were overrun. It could hug the terrain, hide behind tree lines, and pop up where the enemy least expected. The machine stayed in the air longer than any Huey. It didn't just land troops, it hunted for them. Cobras moved ahead of the slicks, raking landing zones with fire. They covered medevacs. They stayed on station when everyone else ran low on fuel. In late August 1967, the first Cobras touched down in Vietnam. Speed was the only way to save the mission. Bell Helicopter didn't have years to experiment. They had months. The solution was a brutal mechanical puzzle. How do you build a revolution overnight? You take a legend and strip it to the bone. Engineers grabbed the proven heart of the UH-1. The engine, the rotor system, the transmission. All of it was salvaged from the transport workhorse. Then they cut away everything else. They removed the wide cargo bay. They threw out the extra seats. The result was the AH-1 Cobra. The fuselage shrunk. Bell made it 3 times narrower than the original Huey. This wasn't just about aerodynamics, it was about survival. A slim profile meant a smaller target for a machine gunner on the ground. They stacked the crew. The gunner took the front seat, the pilot sat behind and slightly above him. Both had a clear, unobstructed view of the kill zone. This narrow tandem seat design changed the physics of the fight. Drag vanished, speed climbed. The Cobra became a specialized Predator, the first of its kind in history. It was a masterpiece of engineering desperation. But it wasn't just about the hunt. Bell added a final layer of redundancy to the cockpit. Both crew members had full flight controls. The military tried to turn the UH-1 transport into a flying tank. It was a mistake. Before Bell engineers finally narrowed the fuselage, the Pentagon believed a standard Huey could double as a dedicated attack platform. The math did not work. Why was an armed transport a failure? It was too heavy to fight. Every machine gun and rocket pod added dead weight. This weight slashed the hover time to critical levels. A standard transport could stay over the jungle for an hour. A loaded gunship ran out of fuel in minutes. It could not support multiple waves of troop insertions. It could not stay for the long fight. The profile was the second problem. The Huey was a wide, boxy target designed for cargo, not combat. It lacked armor for vital engine components. Its slow speed made it a sitting duck for small arms and machine gun fire. Door gunners remained completely exposed in the open cabin. They were human shields for a machine that was never meant to be on the front line. Air cavalry tactics proved that helicopters were the future of the Vietnam War. But the hardware was lagging behind the strategy. The Army realized that versatility was the enemy of efficiency. They needed a machine that could loiter longer and respond faster. The era of the makeshift gunship was over. The military needed a dedicated killer. The weight problems would surface later. First came the era of the field workshops. Mechanics in Vietnam didn't wait for the Pentagon. They grabbed what was available and bolted it to the airframes. They took the standard UH-1B and UH-1C transport birds. They stripped them down. They welded. Maintenance crews attached spare weapon mounts directly to the fuselage. A transport helicopter was becoming a monster. But even these monsters didn't appear overnight. Before the factory kits arrived, the guns were a product of pure desperation. The arsenal was a chaotic mix of steel and high explosives. On the sides, 38 Hydra 70 rockets sat in twin pods. One salvo could saturate a football field-sized area in seconds. Under the nose, a chin-mounted 40mm grenade launcher spat fire into the tree line. The mechanic pulls the trigger. The solenoid clicks. A stream of 40mm shells arcs toward the jungle. The smell of burnt cordite and hydraulic fluid fills the open cabin. In the side doors, door gunners still grip their M60 machine guns. Forward-fixed miniguns added thousands of rounds per minute to the storm. It was an improvised Frankenstein, a flying heavy weapon platform designed to soften up the landing zone before the troops arrived. Before the rockets and heavy armor, the only defense for a Huey was a man on a bungee cord. He leaned out of the open cabin door. Wind hit his face at 100 miles per hour. Under his boots lay 2,000 rounds of ammunition. One belt was all that stood between him and the jungle floor. Could a single machine gun save a helicopter? It had to. The army added a fourth man to the crew, the shotgun rider. He was the designated door gunner. His job was simple: guard the opposite flank. He sat on the edge of the abyss, strapped to the airframe by a single safety strap. He assisted pilots during landings. He cleared jammed weapons. He became the eyes of the machine. Gunners learned to lead their targets from a vibrating, moving platform. They practiced Kentucky windage in their heads. They rationed every belt. Mid-flight resupply was a fantasy. If the gun went silent during extraction, the crew was dead. The protection was a grim joke. Flak jackets could stop a fragment, but a rifle round went through them like paper. The ceramic chest plates weighed over 20 pounds. In the 100-degree heat of Vietnam, gunners often left them on the staging pad. They chose mobility over meat armor. Their only real shields were altitude, speed, and the lead curtain of the M60 machine gun. The casualty rate among door gunners was the highest of any position in the helicopter. They were the most exposed, the most targeted, and the first to die. Logic dictated the butcher's bill. 50% of all Huey losses involved the death or wounding of a door gunner. Military commanders bet on a single assumption: speed and altitude would be their armor. They were wrong. The UH-1 Huey arrived in Vietnam as a flying truck. Its mission was simple: haul infantry and supplies over elephant grass. Pilots trusted sharp maneuvers to stay alive, but the jungle had other plans. How could a hovering crate survive a coordinated ambush? It couldn't. Predictable flight paths turned landing zones into kill boxes. The Huey was slow. At the moment of troop insertion, it was a sitting duck. Enemy fire tore through the thin aluminum skins. Command realized that altitude was no shield against a hidden machine gun. The doctrine collapsed under the weight of the wreckage. By the end of the conflict, the price of this miscalculation was staggering. North Vietnamese fire and harsh conditions claimed 3,305 Hueys. The military lost nearly 50%.